Welcome to Threads 2024, and I'm very delighted today to have an excellent speaker, an individual, and AI expert with us, Ivana Bartoletti. I'll thank you for coming and speaking with us today.
Thank you. Thanks to you. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'll give a brief introduction to you. So Ivana Bartoletti is the Global Chief Privacy Officer at Wipro and a visiting cyber security and privacy executive fellow at Pamplin Business School in Virginia Tech. She also gives programs and education on design and privacy around ethical issues in artificial intelligence and on big data. She was also awarded the Woman of the Year in 2019 for Cybersecurity Awards. Congratulations. And she's a leading woman in AI network and has organized a lobby group of women from different backgrounds to mobilize the tech industry and politics to set clear governance around AI so that we can protect our human values. So I think there couldn't be anybody better than yourself to talk about human evolution, social relations, artificial intelligence, and where we're going. Okay, maybe we could start with a little bit about your backstory. How did you get interested in artificial intelligence and specifically linked to the ethics around it?
Thank you so much. And I think I really like to talk about why I got into this, because if I got into this, then everyone can. And we really need to have a lot of people talking about these issues right now and understanding them, because AI is very much reshaping the way that we work, the way that we live together. So I got into artificial intelligence actually from a policy background. I was a human rights involved in human rights in politics and in a political party at the time, then in government in Italy at the time, and I realized at some point that there was a strong link between data and the decisions that were made, and I soon realized that data was nothing neutral. But data was simply the mirror of society, with its inequalities, with its structural inequalities that have been built over decades and centuries. Mm-hmm. But I realized very soon that data is not this sort of neutral thing, wonderful thing that everybody talks about. Yes, data is brilliant, but it needs to be looked in a very critical way, and not in a critical way. This led me to AI. Because AI is fueled with data. AI has been around for a very long time. But recently, the increase in computational power, alongside the increase of data which we collect about people, about things, and sort of everything that we do on every single moment of our life, the combination of these two things has really brought AI to another level. So with all this data going into these machines, making decisions, predictions about people, I realized that these machines were not neutral either. Because inevitably, an artificial intelligence system is a combination of data, which is not neutral, parameters that are chosen by people, and the environment, which is not neutral either. So that is where the link between human rights and privacy and technology came all together. For me. And I believe in this technology. I like it very much, and I want it to work for people. This is why I am often critical, because I really like it, and I would like to see AI transforming society for the better. But my interest came from that sort of human rights and technology, and I started to learn the coding, and privacy, of course, plays a huge part in all this, and that's slowly I got where I am now.
Lovely. Well, and you're also author of this book, which I have here, An Artificial Revolution on Power, Politics, and AI. I read it. It's a gem. It's a must read for many. Maybe you could just explain, in general, AI and AGI. What do these mean in simple language for everybody who's out there following our conversation?
Yeah, so it's not difficult in the sense that artificial intelligence is just a bad terminology. And it's nice, artificial intelligence, but it's not really what it is. What it is simply machines that are able to automate tasks that were usually done by humans. This is all it is. There's nothing more than that. Of course, you can go to the definition of intelligence, but in reality, what it means is that you're talking about systems that adapt to the environment around them, right? So, for example, you could say that a thermostat in a house, is it an artificial intelligence? Is it intelligence because it adapts in the sense that when the temperature becomes really hot, the thermostat would program itself to go a little bit lower. Now, that is not what we're really talking about, but the concept is something that performs a task that is done by human beings traditionally. Now, of course, things have changed since Alan Turing, and they've become more complex. We said it with computational power and with a lot of data that has gone into the systems. Now, when we talk about artificial general intelligence, then we talk about something else. We talk about systems that are capable of doing many more things, and actually we're nowhere near that. Sometimes artificial general intelligence is used to scare among the people, and sometimes to think that we have AI coming that is going to take over the world, but we're not there yet. And this is very important to realize. Over the last few months, we have seen a lot of people, including the very founders and including the people that have actually been at the helm of this industry, of the tech industry, and arguably also made quite a lot of money out of it. They're now coming out and saying that AI is dangerous, that AI is going to destroy us all. You will probably have seen a letter written and signed by also Elon Musk. So we have, that's where the first thing that I want to say to you and listeners is, to urge a bit of caution here. We're not talking about artificial general intelligence. We're not talking about machines that have a soul, or machines that are conscious, or machines that they are not. They are machines. Mm-hmm. And we have to bear that in mind. If a machine's, let's say, responds through ChatGPT in a way that seems creative, that is computation. It's merely computation. And it's really important that we keep this into consideration, because of course, all this stuff is extremely fascinating. To me, it's fascinating. It's my life, but it's extremely fascinating, but it's not conscious. It's not human-like. It's human-like, but it's not human. So let's, and the other big term that is important to know at this stage is what happened with generative AI, because it's probably what people are experiencing now, which is into our homes, into our houses, which is ChatGPT, Llama, Bard, all these tools that have come up. 100 million people around the world that are using these tools at the moment. And they are these tools that generate text, image, and they bring a lot of fantastic things, but they also bring a lot of risks that we have to manage, especially around the themes that you work on.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll get to the risks in a minute, but just out of curiosity's sake for our listeners, why do you think there was this moratorium placed earlier on this year, I think March or April, from the very founders of this technology? I mean, even Alan Turing and others from the 50s, 60s, 70s have been talking about the possibility that machines might become more intelligent than humans. So if all of these people have been working on this material and developing this technology, why all of a sudden has it taken them this long to suddenly wake up and say, oh my goodness, now it might be a risk for us? Any thoughts?
Marketing?
Okay.
So no, to be serious, yes. I mean, obviously, these technologies carry risks, but we know them, right? We know the risks that they carry, and there may be some that we don't know about. So being cautious and say we need rules and governance is important. And this is what the entire world is doing at the moment. For example, right? Generative AI. And I talk about generative AI because it's in everybody's life at the moment. I mean, people use ChatGPT, and I believe the potential of ChatGPT and similar tools is big. I use tools to help me with my essays, to help me not to write the content, but to refine it. Students use it in schools, and they use calculators before. Now they're using ChatGPT and other similar tools. But what are the risks with this? So these tools offer something really important, which is access to human knowledge. This is fabulous, right? This is great. It means that we have a democratization of knowledge that is important for everybody. But at the same time, we have a risk in the sense that the language that goes into these tools is not a neutral language. It's a language that replicates the language on the web, right? And the language on the web is not a neutral language because it replicates the inequalities in the world. I'll give you an example. I asked ChatGPT, tell me a story about a boy and a girl who are in the last year of secondary school, and they are deciding what to do to university. And ChatGPT said to me, once upon a time, there was a boy and a girl, and the boy said, I'm going to study engineering. And the girl said, I am going to study art because I don't understand numbers. Is it by accident that this is happening? No, it's happening because this is the web. These are the data. These are the things that we've been collating and creating as content for decades and centuries. This is our society. Now, you, like me, you want society to be better, right? You want society to be more open and to be the issue, the risk that we're facing here is that we are codifying through software society as it is now in something that is used by everybody and it could narrow the language that we use. On the other hand, it's an opportunity because you could train a generative AI system to preserve an indigenous language. You could train an AI system to preserve the culture of a community and keep it alive rather than have it disappearing. But to do so, we have to democratize these tools, the creation of these tools. So what is the problem here? Who is going to create these things called large language models? Google, Facebook, and the big tech, once again monopolizing a lot of power around them. So on the one hand, we have this enormous potential that I believe in on the use of these generative AI tools to protect and safeguard the traditions and languages instead of making all the same. On the other hand, you still have to deal with the issue of access and the ability of communities, for example, to do their own data practices, which is something that has an extreme potential for democratizing our societies.
Okay, very good points that you raise, particularly about the democratization of knowledge. And also this links then obviously to the ethics behind what you're trying to advocate for. So when we come to ethics, it's very interesting that it seems that the Europeans have been largely pushing ethics, whereas we sort of see that in American and particularly in Chinese contexts, it's more about a race to get a hold of and contain and control the systems. Would you say that there's a special place in Europe or for the ethics of this, or how will we choose the ethics? Who will choose the ethics?
Because it was actually, it was actually Canada the forefront of this. An algorithmic impact assessment for public sector was developed. One of the first ones was developed by the Canadian in Canada, and it was a really interesting one because we were looking at it and say, look, Canada's made it this tool available for AI being deployed in public sector. I think the ethical element, ethics is a word that I kind of come not to like that much, ethical AI, because to me it's very much of ethics washing exercise, right? In the sense that you kind of, it's become very inflated and very much that gives a chance to companies to window dress a lot of the things that they do. So I think I prefer talking about responsibility and things like that. But regardless of that, I think there are two things here. One is genuine, right? One is very genuine. And then the fact that we are realizing the harms. I was in England at the time of Cambridge Analytica. right?
Mm-hmm.
The harms are there and visible. If you if people in Europe, they've heard, and beyond Europe, they've heard of what happened in the city of Rotterdam, where an algorithm was used by local government to decide whether somebody would receive benefits or not, and the system automatically gave a higher degree of possibility of defrauding the benefit to people who had double nationality. And double nationality is a proxy for immigration. So
Right.
automatically, regardless of the actual things that factors, people with double nationality, that means immigrants, were considered more likely to defraud the government. Their benefits were taken away. Kids ended up in poverty, taken away from the families. Okay? Why this happened? Not because people wanted to punish the immigrants, but because the bias is so ingrained that people don't think that double nationality is a proxy for immigration. So on the one hand, the harms of artificial intelligence, especially on the most vulnerable, and I'm talking about women, immigrants, has been very, very clear. Actually, the harm of technology has been clear. For example, the use of these systems at borders, the use of systems like facial recognition that have harmed a lot of women of color in particular. So on the one hand, we have seen the risks. On the other hand, let us not forget that the argument of rights and ethics and responsible AI is often used in the West in a way to counter the AI which is produced in other parts of the world, like China. Because artificial intelligence is very much about geopolitics, right? So you have the US and Europe and the UK saying we need like-minded countries to drive ethical and responsible AI. In reality, yes, we do want ethical AI, but behind that, there's also a wider discourse around competition and sort of geopolitics.
How or who will govern this? Who will be responsible for being responsible, if you will, of the prejudices, the biases that are already very existent in our societies?
So the AI needs to be regulated and not self-regulated, because there is, to an extent, a conflict between the ambitions of a business and the rest. But the governance coming from business is important, to the point that companies now, some of them, are realizing that it's actually it's a competitive edge to put due diligence into AI and all of this. But this is the companies. The companies, they won't self-regulate. We know that. We've seen that by how the Wild West that the internet has become. But so you need another level of governance. So, for example, the US at the moment, there's a new proposal, a new act in discussion, which is the creation of a US AI Act, which basically very different from the European approach, always risk-based, but a slightly different, because whilst the European approach is very much like we govern AI as a dishwasher, right? So, for example, we govern the product, regardless of whether the product is, we govern the product. And if the product is high risk, then we wrap some more controls around it, including having this high risk AI into a European database. The US approach is interesting because the US approach says we need a licensing agency. So we need the AI product to be licensed by an agency that says this is fit to hit the market. And then there is the individual accountability. I mean, there's also the individual. That's where it's very important that we understand a lot of these tools. And also there is the accountability the state has to put in place. For example, if I am the victim of a decision that is made by a machine, which is a discriminatory decision, I need to be able to do a class actions together with others. I need to be able to have redress. But this is where we get into a lot of other problems, because, for example, discrimination through the system is much more difficult to identify and to understand, which is very, very problematic, especially for migrants and especially for minorities, because discrimination in these systems often doesn't happen directly. So discrimination doesn't happen because you're a woman, because you're black, because you're Muslim, or because, on the ground. So you're not able to challenge on the ground the protected characteristic. But now this discrimination happens by proxy. So somebody can be discriminated because they visit a particular website which acts as a proxy for religion. So discrimination laws have to really be a little bit revisited in order to really understand how discrimination happens in AI and algorithmic decision making. There's a lot to do, basically.
Yes, there is. So much. Coming back to that, in your book, you state that at a global level, data is becoming a geopolitical arsenal that is creating a new form of colonialism. You mentioned this as digital colonialism. But what about if we look at the global South, not by geography, but by the political understanding of global South? Are there any more risks there? And has anybody engaged with the global South, and how, because they might be somehow implied in this, and how might they contribute with certain responsibilities against the dominant narrative of the global North?
It's a very good question, and actually a lot of scholars and activists over recent times have talked about something called data colonialism. And there is a lot of truth in this, because as you can imagine, these big companies, they have access to a lot of data. And I remember a UNESCO conference in China a few years back where there was a minister for Bangladesh, and he a Bengali minister, and he basically said something that was on stage with me, and he said, well, actually, Facebook comes and takes a lot of data from people, from Bengali people, right? And what do they do? What do we get in return? They train their algorithms, but their headquarters, they are all in Silicon Valley, right? So this is really interesting, because there is little doubt that the data is very much, people talk about data as the new oil, which is maybe not really correct, but it's obviously the data is very much capital in our world, and as much as happen with all the differences, obviously, but there is a sense of these big companies colonizing a lot of parts of the world, gathering a lot of this data, and that also explains why there has been a pushback in recent time. I mean, take India, for example. India's got the largest population in the world, 700 million of smartphones users. I mean, just let it sink in, 700 million smartphone users. This basically means that there is a lot of data. And correctly, India is saying, if you look, for example, at what has happened in India in terms of investment in technology, in terms of India correctly saying, well, hey, hold on a second, we can harness this data for the benefit of our country. So what's happening over recent years is that you've seen a lot of data expropriation coming from different countries that are like, they are sort of poorer from a financial standpoint, but they're rich in terms of this new resource, which is data. One time it would have been a mineral, whatever, but now is data. And this expropriation has been happening, continues to happen in many different ways. But the whole AI supply chain is a story of this. And let us not forget this, because behind every single smartphone, behind the training of an AI system, there are loads of unpaid people who look, for example, at the training of these machines. The way that, for example, a lot of social media companies, they're now saying, oh, we can recognize harms online, is because they've shown loads and loads of images of pedophilia, of rape, to people players in other parts of the world that for a few dollars an hour, less than $1 an hour, have been forced to look at these images for day after day, with terrible consequences on their mental health. Now, obviously, and the same is for wider issues, because an AI is not just Silicon Valley. AI is not the smartphone. It's not just a smartphone. AI is materials, right? It's microchips. AI is industrial stuff. And again, that is very much of a global supply chain. This is again a story of exploitation. So, when people think AI, they think of sort of the Silicon Valley, the
Yeah.
culture of the work in a workplace where we're all free and we go to work in jeans and t-shirt. But behind AI, there is very much of a story of globalization and the story of colonization. There's very much of a story of abuse. I mean, there is a lot behind this. And this is what the world is coming to realize now. I mean, we talked about the risk, but and the dark side, which is important to know, because if we know it, then we can handle it. We can put in place the right things. But there are also very good things. I always say, for example, and I also think, for example, that the ChatGPT or similar tools, and I know that some people disagree with me on this, but I mean, to an extent, there is a leveling of opportunities for people who don't have, for example, English as a first language.
Yep.
And they can use these tools to write essay. They can use these tools to do a job, apply for a job. I mean, I have been living, I mean, I speak Italian, right? I certainly come from the rich north, and I certainly am white skin, and I certainly don't have any, I have not suffered any of what others suffer, obviously. But what I'm trying to say here is that I found it difficult to apply for a job when I went to the UK or when I was in America. I mean, this tool is quite important, right? Because it means that you can certainly rely less on others. You can be more independent. I'm thinking about women in particular. I'm thinking about the fact that there is a lot of need of skills in this area, which means that but there's also simplification of skills. So you can, for example, code to these systems. I mean, a lot of things can become a lot easier and can actually become a little bit of an equalizer. It can be a little bit of an equalizer. To a certain point. I mean, we should dig a little bit deeper, but at the surface, right? Let's stay there.
So coming back to equalization and just education, two questions wrapped in there. What happens to the teachers? What do you think happens to the general socialization that school was the promise, sort of a democratization that everyone, the masses, could have access to education? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, there are no easy answers to this. The answer is actually, I don't know. It depends on how we shape it. To an extent, what you just said reminded me of what happened when we went from painting to photography, right? Where we went to, photography arrived and painters were like, oh, our jobs is what's going to happen to the value of painting, which is the most noble thing. And in reality, photography took away from painting one thing, the picture of real life in a moment, in a particular, because photography did that. But painters could be the painters that they are today, which is the creative, more creative, more. Is AI going to be the same thing? Big $1 million questions. I mean, will AI enable teachers, in this case, to focus more on the relationship with a child? This is rather than on checking homeworks, rather than on the. I don't know. That it depends on who is in charge, and we go back to the same question.
So in your book, you had talked about, perhaps this is an opportunity for us to look at what it truly means to be human again. Yeah. And I loved that, the way you left that hopeful statement at the end of your book. So if I just may ask you, what are some of the things that make us so beautifully human that perhaps AI can't emulate or copy?
Well, I think when you're looking for when you go and see a museum, right? You go and see a photo, a picture of La Gioconda, right? Or Van Gogh, or you go there because that picture is a story. There because it gives you goosebumps, right? Now it could be replicated by AI. But are you really interested in the drawing, or are you interested in what's behind it? Now, what's behind it is the humanity. And that is fascinating. That's Van Gogh. It's a story of and his life, and it's a history, it's a moment in time. That doesn't mean that the AI created the art is not beautiful. It may well be as beautiful as it is, but it's different. It's a different thing. So that, to me, summarizes it all, right? I don't want to fear AI. I I don't want to feel it because there is no, not because I ignore the risk. Actually, I talk about the risks a lot, but because I have this hope that how humanity is going to be able to drive it and use it for the common good. But one thing I would say is that this is not going to happen if every one of us doesn't get stuck in. I mean, honestly, using these tools and reporting what they do wrong, using social media to report the faults, calling the companies into account. I mean, this is stuff that we can all do together. If our cities and towns, they deploy facial recognition, I mean, or they say, for example, we're deploying an algorithmic system, you know, saying, actually, we want to be involved in these discussions. What I'm trying to say is humanity is making these decisions together, right? Humanity comes together in this situation. So talking about this is fantastic, but it's really about getting stuck in and just using these technologies, trying it out. If you see something in an application that doesn't work, if there is something that is not clear, just call it out.
Very interesting things to think about and to get involved and call out and be responsible. Thank you again, Ivana. Pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.